Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Joel, last week we were laughing. This week we're going to complain. I mean, if you got to cover the whole spectrum, right?
Exactly.
Well, we're not really going to complain, but we are going to talk about complaining because it is a thing. I mean,
Yes.
It's something, it's more than a thing. It's actually fairly popular. In fact, well, you probably see it all the time in your coaching practice. It's almost epidemic, really.
I agree. Complaining is literally programming the brain to find more things to complain about. It's one of the most simple things that people unintentionally get stuck in, where when you talk about your problems, you talk about the victimhood of everything, you talk about life sucks, then that becomes your reality. If you say it enough, it becomes your reality. And when you're around a lot of complaining is very contagious as well. I seem to see groups of people that tend to be complainers, that sort of group together, and group complaining can lead to even more intense complaining. And you see it with political parties, you see it along just in life in general. And most people do not understand one of the worst things you can do for success in life is to be a complainer. It blocks success. It blocks the concept of the law of attraction, the way we want to use it. It certainly works with the law of attraction, but it blocks it how we want to use it, because complaining is literally just putting all your energy and focus on what you don't like. And that's what you get more of.
Yeah, and ensuring it, right? That's the part we, like you say, we kind of tend to skip over that part, but we do so at our own peril, because if you attract that stuff, the universe says, "Okay, your wish is my command. Are you sure you want it?"
But and even on a level of your biology, when part of complaining, you're suggesting everything's wrong, then your brain's looking for a solution. Your subconscious is looking for a solution to a problem that likely isn't really the problem. It's just the idea that I don't like this. And often complaining goes hand in hand with victimhood. The idea that I am somehow wrong by this, or and this is in social media sort of contributes to this. I see a lot of people, just the negativity in politics, like we almost talk about every week. They're complaining about the system isn't working. We're not getting what is going right in the world. We never talk about that. We'll complain about this perception, or this political party didn't do this or didn't do that, and versus here's what's going right. We don't get any of that anymore. So complaining to me, it's sort of the opposite of gratitude in a sense. It's not really, but in some ways it's the same energy. Complaining is suggesting that we're inherently broken a lot of times, like nothing is going right for me, or I hear that all the time. Like, I'm and I see it with very wealthy people. Some of the stuff they complain about is fascinating to me.
Wow, yeah, and that's something that us ordinary folk wouldn't even think about. But just because you have money doesn't mean you don't complain.
Well, I think I've told you before, some of these families that I work with that, literally are worth $1 billion or more. Some of particularly the children of the
oh yeah,
are the ones that feel they're being wrong by somehow. There's an imbalance. They're always scanning for what's wrong. A lot of them don't have the need to work, so they sit around all day and it turns into a complain-a-thon. I make a good living with some people, not because I'm trying to obviously help them, but you can sit there and make a lot of money, listen to people complain, and then I try to redirect. What's going right? Well, nothing. I go, well, I mean, did you look out your back door at the Atlantic Ocean, or you're paid for 12,000 square foot home? I mean, is that something to well, my sister has a bigger home than I do. So, oh, okay. Well, I literally have heard that on that same statement.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's laughable for the rest of us, but it's not laughable for the person who's in the middle of something like that. And I don't say that to particularly say, oh, those poor billionaire children. I mean, anybody who is in the middle of a mindset, because that's really what that is, who's in the middle of a mindset of victimhood, of, oh, this horrible thing is going on that I need to complain about. You don't see it when you're in the middle of it. That's one of the reasons we need to have a coach or a therapist point it out to us, because we don't see it in ourselves most of the time.
When and that's where the reframe comes in. You know, I have here's a, not the exact example, but I had a client this previous weekend. Him and his mom have this very toxic arguing relationship. And they're conditioned to, she complains about everything he doesn't do. And then respond to that, does less. And so this cycle just keeps going.
Wow.
And so they had a big blow up this weekend, and it's really frustrating when a client's mommy shows up at the appointment with them, but that's what happened. So I had to deal with both of them. Yeah. And so what I was able to point out and just sort of readjust, I said, look, I get that this frustrates you, that he's playing that, but he has gotten a job. He is working 4 days a week. He is in school. He started school. He's, I go through the checklist of what he's doing right. I said, has that been mentioned, or is the fact that he has cereal bowls in his room the only thing you're focused on? And so when I got her to filter, what is going right? Yeah, I'm not saying we need cereal bowls in the room, but in the big scheme of where we're going, it's better. He was horribly depressed, wasn't doing anything. He's taking action. He's working, enrolled in community college, and there's cereal bowls. How do we want to look at this? Are we going to complain about it, and that reframe changes that relationship drastically?
It's going to change not just the relationship, it's going to change the individual herself and the individual himself.
Yes.
It's going to change them, because when we focus on things that are going wrong through complaining about it, and we end up getting more stuff to complain about, so also law of attraction works the other way.
Yes.
And we start appreciating things, then we start getting more things going right. That's something that's actually the hardest part, I think, about law of attraction. This notion that what we focus on and what we think about actually causes things to happen. Because there's a certain level within us. I think it has to do perhaps with our cultures, with the way we are taught things. But there's a certain level within us that says that's not the way things work. You can't. That's just wishful thinking. That's not going to actually produce anything. That's not going to be
magical thinking is a term therapists
magical
will use
thinking.
sometimes. Magical thinking.
Yeah. And hey, I was one of the ones who thought that way. So I'm not pointing fingers. I'm saying it's a thing. It's a real thing. It's not the easiest thing in the world to come to grips with.
Completely. I was on a panel one time explaining sort of my theories and concepts, and this old school social worker who probably had 50 years in the industry, she goes, Mr. Elson, that's just magical thinking. And I go, it certainly is. It's very magical. It is
not terribly helpful to her, but I did throw it back at her.
Yeah, I'm like, it was incredible. It's incredibly magical. I'm glad that your side is working for you as well. So
right.
But that's sort of the everything, when what you see and what your perspective matters. And one of the things that I do when and I'm very open about this. I don't claim to have a perfect life. I claim I'm a normal human being. I can have some bad days. And I work on that. I just don't have bad days for very long. I might have a bad hour. I might have a bad 15 minutes. But I have a reframing process that does that. One of the things when I start finding myself like, man, is this the whole point? Whatever negative thought could come up, I'm like, did I eat out of a garbage can today? No. Was I in jail last night? No. Am I homeless? No. Do I have, and so I go through the checklist of some of the worst things I've ever experienced. And once I check no to all that, how bad could today be? So I move up the scale. So then I can say, yeah, I really appreciate the fact, even though I might be tired today and I got a full load of clients, I still love what I do. I really need to always, and I can turn my mindset around and have a much stronger day. My perspective of the day changes when I start appreciating the day. If I'm complaining about the day, then I'm going to get more things to complain about.
I'm reminded of my one experience with psychotherapy. I saw a therapist for about a 6-7 month period, something like that, because it was at the time in my life where I was very shy, very introverted, and not doing well in terms of relationships, and not doing well in terms of a lot of things going on in my life. So I needed to understand why it was that my relationships were not working, that they weren't turning into anything. And she was very helpful. I want to give her a lot of credit because she was very helpful to me in terms of helping to understand that a lot of it really didn't have anything to do with me at all. It had to do with the people I was interacting with, but some of it did have to do with me. But there was one thing that she said that stuck with me, and it didn't stick with me in a bad way. It stuck with me in a way that I now laugh at. But I remember her making a comment that one of her least favorite things in the world, I think the way she phrased it was, "I hate this." One of the things that she hated was the song from, I think it's Pinocchio. "When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you." And it was her opinion that was the most destructive song that had ever been written in human history. Yeah. And she really did believe that. And she went on and on and on about it. Now, I didn't have any of the knowledge of what we talk about here, what we've since talked about since I started this podcast. So I had no way to bring this up to her. But it occurs to me years later that when she was in that mode, she was least helpful to me.
Yes.
She was least helpful to me and probably least helpful to other clients, because she basically was saying it's not possible for you to influence your own outcome.
That mindset is exactly sort of the standard behind complaining in this sense, you know.
It is.
And one of the cases I might have gone too far on, at least at the time I thought I did. So this lady calls and she's interested in coaching, and I'm telling her my philosophy. So she says, and I said, and everybody I work with, has some form of an exercise program. That's just sort of that standard what I do. It doesn't have to be my version of exercise, but
Sure,
there needs to be movement, just walking or something.
Yeah.
And she quickly got defensive. She said, "I have lost the use of my legs and I'm in a wheelchair and I cannot exercise." So my answer, which was a little harsh at the time, was, "Do your arms work?"
Oh dear. Yes.
So
truth, but a harsh way of doing it. Yeah.
Well, she hung up on me, but she did circle back and she said, "That was a pretty harsh question." I said, "Look," I said, "I am not in any way, I'm sorry you're going through what you're going through. But the problem is you're stuck in this negative thing. Yes, you're in a wheelchair. Is there, the fact your arms move, you can move your arms, you can do some things, we can get stronger. There's things we can do. But you're going to need, you have every right to complain if anybody has a right to complain. So there's no argument that you have things wrong. But the problem with complaining is you're reinforcing the situation, and there's the way you have painted it. There's no way out of this.
Yes, that's it right there.
Right
There's
there.
no way out of it.
Yes, and complaining reinforces there's no way. So she liked that answer. We started working together. We literally, she got some 2-pound weights. She started using those. She changed her mindset. She was not ever going to be able to walk that with, at least without assistance. But she was able to, she got her arms very strong. She decided to compete in the Paralympics. I think.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And she can do a one-arm pull-up pulling her wheelchair up with each arm.
Oh my God.
So she's a beast. And so she laughs now she said, "You remember when we called me out for not being able to exercise?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "But I needed that." She said, "I realized that when I hung up on you, that's what I kept. I didn't want that harsh answer. And it's the greatest thing that I ever received, because at the end of the day, my legs aren't going to work. And so I got to accept it's just not going to work. What am I going to do with what I got? There's people that have no arms or legs. So so her reframe of that, she has an incredible life. She is a personal trainer that works and a physical therapist that works with people that don't have use of their legs.
Wow.
So she's a
story.
Superstar. And all that started with me telling her, "Do your arms work?" And but you have to break that complaining cycle because it's so prevalent in people, and it's natural. Usually the families of complainers, how many people gather at the gym to talk about what's going right in our country?
I can't say I've encountered that one.
Yeah, of course, I interrupt them with the idea of that. They don't like to be interrupted with that stuff, but I'll walk in, the economy this or economy that, and I go, "Hey, my economy's great. How you guys doing today?" And they're like, I I said, your perspective is what's making you miserable. This is, yeah. Are there things going on? Absolutely. There's no argument. There's things going on. But when you sit there and focus on it, we've used this analogy before. And in fact, we're going to have one more of these days, I think, coming up this week. It's 100 degrees outside.
Mm.
And everybody you encounter goes, my God, it sure is hot today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's 100 degrees. It is hot.
Mm-hmm.
But saying it over and over and complaining about it all day is not helping it be any cooler.
No, it doesn't.
In fact, if your perception of it is more than when you do that. I just did this experiment with them one time. I was in an experiment. I wasn't conducting it, but when I was undergoing my hypnotherapy training,
okay.
The facilitator, it was really hot. We were in California, and it was one of the, what is it, Death Valley or whatever that was.
That's plenty hot. Yeah.
107 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a nice air-conditioned, beautiful facility, and they're doing this hypnotherapy. And his point was, the hypnotherapist trainer was saying exactly this. Everybody they encounter is going, it's really hot outside. Yes, it is really hot. Well, there's no argument it's hot, but the reinforcement, the complaining exacerbates your perception of the hot heat. So he basically put us into a mindset where when you walk outside, there's a breeze. It's a nice, beautiful 78 degrees. And, and we really did that. And when I walked outside, well, I'm not kidding you. My perception of the heat it was a nice, crisp day outside.
I believe it.
And it was, and I was fascinated by that because I still knew, for those that don't understand, hypnotherapy doesn't make you cluck like chickens, or it doesn't make you not realize where you're at. It just simply changes that internal dialogue a lot of times, or perspective. And so you receive things differently. So it literally changed how I felt out there. And so the complaint, then his experiment was, we all stood out there and they came out and he said, yeah, we were all talking about how good it felt. And he goes, my God, it's hot out here. And seriously, almost instantly it was hot again.
Yes.
He didn't have to snap his finger. It's just because, again, once you're believing it, you walk into something, you feel better. The perception of this is one of my favorite experiments. We've touched on this in different ways. People that feel they had a terrible night's sleep complain about not sleeping. It's miserable. I didn't sleep last night and I'm really tired. Well, when they've done experiments where they showed them, well, you actually slept great last night. The monitor says you got a good solid 8.5 hours. You didn't. They're like, oh my God, I feel great. I'm rested. Now they got a terrible night's sleep, but they believed it and they complained about it, and it exacerbated their day. When they believed they had a good night's sleep, they have their perspectives all. So complaining focuses the power of the brain to even more intense focus, good or bad, but complaining is the negative side of it. And that's what exacerbates. That's what comes out. And people that get a lifelong, I feel sorry for people that complain all the time. And I cannot be around, I have to in my profession, but there is no one in my orbit that are complainers, because I just can't, in my personal life, I can't handle it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. There's another word that comes to my mind too, that I think is quite relevant, not just to this, but also to what you were talking about a moment ago. And that word is training. That's something that you do when you go to the gym. You're training your body. You're training your muscles to be strong, to grow, and so on and so forth. And the same thing applies to either complaining or appreciating, depending on which flip side you're on. You're training your brain. And literally, we're not talking about in some kind of a spiritual woo-woo. I mean, it literally does train your brain to expect one or the other, depending on which way you're training it.
Yes, completely.
That I think it's important to remember that we are training our brains. This is not something that's kind of wacky. This is what we're doing to ourselves.
You're literally programming the perception of your brain at a subconscious level. It's a real term. And so when complaining programs the brain to complain about things, and it's normal. It's and society has always sort of like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that. It's really difficult. Yeah, things are terrible. My life sucks. And it seems to serve a purpose. A lot of people become addicted to. One of my clients he has this weird dynamic. He's doing very well, but his mom is very old, and he's 50. He's doing well, but what he will do is he'll get on the phone with her. He talks to her once a week, and he gets on the phone, and all he does is tell her about all his ailments and problems.
Mm.
And then she calls me. She said, "He sounds so bad." I said, "He's doing fantastic. I mean, here's the here's the evidence. He has been conditioned. He's what has always happened in their dynamic. When he was younger, he complained. So she solved that by buying him something or doing so.
Right.
His entire life has been complaining has been rewarding.
Yes.
And he can't break that. And it's not rewarding anymore. And he said, well, but he's still stuck on that. I said, why are you telling your 90-year-old mother to how bad things are and how your knee hardly works anymore? And which isn't true. You've had surgery. Things are good. That your living conditions are terrible. They're not. And I sent her a picture. I said, here's his living conditions. It's just, he has a narrative of complaining to you, and that his reality with her is only reinforced through complaining, and he is working on it. He's identified. He doesn't do it with anybody else. It's just his mom. He does that.
I actually have a story that I can indirectly tell. I won't tell it directly because I don't have permission to tell it directly. But it involves somebody who I know, a business associate, I would say even a friend. And she had a weekend that for most people would be a weekend from hell, because both her mother and her grandmother died within a day of each other this past weekend.
Oh, no.
Now, this person is also very much into the kind of spirituality, LOA belief, and so forth that we are. And I'm willing to bet, sure, she's going through pain right now. She's going through a very difficult time. I'm willing to bet by the end of this week, at some point, she and I are going to have a conversation, and she's going to say to me just how relieved she is. Not that her mother is gone, not that her grandmother is gone, but now she doesn't have to deal with trying to care for both of them, because she was the caregiver.
Yeah.
She was the one taking care of both of them.
Yes.
And that huge load has come off of her. So I know she's going to reframe it such that she's really sad that her mom is gone. She's sad that her grandmother is gone. But what a load off her now that she doesn't have to deal with all that anymore.
And I don't know who you're talking about or what's going on, but I will tell you this also, that likely her mother and grandmother are very grateful that they have transitioned to the non-physical, and they are no longer.
It's a fair bet.
I would assume that, once you realize that, and I went through the loss of my son TJ, as you know, and that was hell. I'm not saying I got there quickly, but it took, in a little while, I was able to start looking at it from the perspective of, he isn't dead. The non-physical is just separate. It's a separate. And I believe that completely. There's not I hope that's right. I believe that thoroughly. So while I can't, to me, he's out of town. He's, it maybe, wherever that source energy, wherever that is, that's where he is. And so I'll be connected with that again. So I was able to get there that way. And I'm not minimalizing. Anybody that has pain and they're losing a loved one is an individual journey of grief. You don't need to listen to anybody else how to do it. You got to figure it out yourself. You can get suggestions, but there is no wrong grieving. I was told I was grieving wrong for a while.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Apparently I wasn't grieving enough.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That just staggers my imagination that someone would actually say that.
Yeah, this lady who had lost a son, she saw some of my posts on Facebook probably 2 months after TJ passed, and I was talking about positive stuff moving forward, telling funny stories about TJ, and so she sent me an instant message sent me a message and saying, I don't think you have grieved properly and you're in denial. And I said, well, thank you for your input, but I think I'm doing it the way I would do it. She goes, no, it's been 7 years since my son passed away, and I have not remotely gotten over it. I haven't left my house, but occasionally, and I'm
rejecting it.
Yeah. And so I said, I'm sorry you're going through that. your grieving process is just a little different than mine. I'm not
Mm.
judging yours. She said, well, you're not doing it right.
Mm.
And I said, well, thank you again for your input, and I will take your advice and maybe look into it. And just, I was kind. Sorry you're
Mhm.
going through this. I hope
Mhm.
things improve for you. But clearly, because she was never really thoroughly completed or been in the
No.
cycle of the grieving process, she just was mad that I had somehow gotten there, and she all those years hadn't. And I feel very sorry for her. She, last I know, that's been TJ, this weekend will be 10 years since TJ passed away.
What was it?
So
10 years? Wow. Okay.
yeah, and so her son was 7 years before that. So the last I saw of her, she's in no better shape almost 20 years later, 17 years later.
Wow.
So and it's not critical of her. I'm just simply saying
Yeah.
all of this is, life is the entirety of life. If you look at the amount of time on a timeline that we're here, and it's a speck. It's just it's not even a dot when you look at the whole thing. We're here for 80 years, 100 years, whatever that our thing's going to be. So while we're here, we're all going to, we all were born, and at some point we're all going to die. What we do in the middle of that, I just can't think I can't see where complaining adds value to that very short period of time. I believe we chose to be here. You know that. I believe we chose sort of where we're at. And I can't imagine them going, I'm going to have this life, this is going to happen, and I'm going to go live this, experience it, and I'm going to complain about this shit all day. That was not how I would do it.
Yeah, I can't imagine you doing that at all.
Yeah. So I just feel that, and this is, again, not critical of anybody, but just understanding families that complain, groups of people that complain. If you sit around and talk about the corrupt political system and how everything's failing and all of this, and that's the only dialogue you have, that's your reality. So you're now only looking at a world that is broken. You're missing the stuff that's going well. And there are things going well.
Now, there is one thing I am curious about, and I want to get your take on this one, because one thing that I have come to understand and even value to a certain degree, I'm still working on this piece of it, is that with all these negative things that we experience in our lives, because there's a myriad of things that we can experience that are negative, with all of them that come into our lives, every single one of them serves a purpose of basically mirroring to us what we don't want so that we can have the opportunity to identify something we want instead. And very often we don't learn that. Sometimes we do learn that, but the point is that's where there is value to these negative experiences, including complaining. I mean, one of the things I've liked to say, I've said this many times on the show, is I don't see any value in worrying. Well, actually, there is a value to worrying. Worrying is a way of getting yourself to ask yourself, is this really the state I want to be in? I mean, it's giving you the option of looking at an alternative.
Sure.
And that's really true for any of the negative emotions.
I agree.
So when I look at it that way, I can see a value to it.
Well,
The question is, at that point then becomes, it isn't so much whether or not it's good or bad, it's whether or not I want to stay there.
Well, and that's the key. As with any emotion, you and I discuss this frequently, and we completely agree on this. All emotions have value. They exist for a reason. Now, when you understand what the emotions are, they can be signals to you that things aren't going right, and you need to move up the emotional guidance scale. That's what emotions exist for in my world. The same thing sort of goes with complaining or worrying, is they can be signals like, oh my God, I'm complaining about this. And then I can stop and say, wait a minute, I'm not a complainer. I need to evaluate what's going on with me, because I'm complaining about the most benign thing on the planet. It's just because it's all benign. It really is. It's just my problems today, or any perception of problems. I have no perceived problems in the big scheme of things. But if I'm like, this didn't work out like I like, or this happens, like, what? None of it's a big deal at all. There's nothing that comes along in my world I can't handle anymore. It's just, but when I'm complaining, that is a signal that I need to stop what I'm doing, adjust my mindset, and really move forward, because it's not as good place. So you're right. It's habitual complaining, is systematic generational complaining that is very damaging, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is. I really do. I've been dabbling in doing writing lately because I'm trying to market this new service that I have, this positivity partnering service. And so toward that end, I'm creating these articles that basically the story, short stories to illustrate, how that could actually play out in the real world. I came up with a story recently that one of the themes that I played out in the story was that the character kept asking herself over and over again throughout the story. It's like her subconscious mind was talking to her, and her subconscious mind was saying, "Who are you really?" And that phrase, I kept using that phrase throughout the story. Who are you really? It occurs to me that's something that ties in directly to this whole idea of complaining, or really any of these other behaviors. Are you the person who complains? Is that who you really are? Who are you really? That's what that question is aiming at.
Right.
Because it's a kind of way of saying to yourself, is this who I am? Is this who I really am? Is this who I want to be? Is this the kind of person I want to be? Because I can change that if I want to.
Right. You can. And that's again, that's where there's value in that. Anything can have value. That the one of the concepts of NLP, neuro linguistic programming, is reframing.
Yes.
And I'm a big reframer. So anything can be reframed to a perspective that's valuable. I had a client come in one time, it's been several years ago, and he had all kind of financial troubles. And I said, "What's your biggest financial problem right now?" He said, I'm 3 months late to a credit card bill to Bank of America. I have no income, no savings, and they're bothering me. I go, "That isn't a problem at all." And he's like, "Oh my God, that's the biggest problem." I said, if we can solve that problem in the next hour, will you be willing to follow the rest of the stuff? Because if you can solve that problem, that will be a miracle.
Okay.
So we called Bank of America, and I've done this 1,000 times. Introduced myself. He was there. We had to go through all that. The Bank of America did not like me on the call because they knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
They
talked to him before.
Yeah. I said, so my client owes you $15,000 and he's 3 months late. He has no income. He has nothing you can attach. There's nothing there. So we are deciding between bankruptcy. Now, we weren't, but that was the thing. Or can we negotiate a much greater reduce the amount by significant, and then he'd be allowed to start payments once he is employed. And at first they're going, "No, that's not acceptable." I said, "Okay, thank you." And she said, No, wait a minute. And this is how they always do. So she said, "What can he pay?" And I said, "Well, I mean, as I said, he has nothing, but he wants to make something. So how about $1,000?" She goes, "That's unacceptable." I go, "Okay, well, what would you guys suggest?" She said, "We have we would have a settlement offer of $7,500. So once I had her at $7,500, I knew I had her,
Yeah.
So we kept going back and forth and back. We ended up at $3,000 that would be spread out over 2 years and he didn't have to start payments for 6 months.
Oh boy.
No interest on those payments, by the way.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I said, "Problem solved." And he's like, "Oh my God, that's just
well, when you're in that place, that does seem impossible. I mean,
yeah."
it
And
literally does.
so with that, I said, so anything is there that is not, and if you perceive that as your biggest problem, and he said, "I've been worried and complaining about my financial situation." And I said, "So what I need you to do right now is we need to get really aggressive about getting a job. And instead of looking for the career, let's go get any job while continuing to look for the career.
Sure.
And we'll keep moving up that." Within he did that with all the credit cards over a 5-year period, working, doing really well. Everything was paid off, and his life was changed because he got out of that mold. And it started with that day of understanding his biggest problem was solved in about 35 minutes.
Yeah. That has a number of different elements to it I think are really important. The first one is the experience of something that seems impossible becoming possible.
Yes.
That alone shakes up your world in a very positive way and makes you realize that you didn't have the whole picture before. You thought you did.
Yes.
You thought you had the whole picture, but you found out, no, not so much. I really didn't have the whole picture. And now that I see the larger picture, I think about it differently.
Yes. And then once you open up that hope, that possibility, that belief, then all things become possible. But complaining is very much that it gets you stuck in the "I have no action forward. I am a victim of all of this," which the problem, and I use that word that can be triggering to some people. Again, that triggers you. Walt at loatoday.net is who you email. But the concept.
Nice to know who my friends are. Let me tell you.
Yeah, no problem there. But what I mean by being in that victim mindset, it isn't to be critical of somebody. A victim mindset suggests, as we're talking about, there is no action forward. I am stuck, and most likely it's not my fault, and I'm stuck, and I just don't know what to do. And when you got to shake that up, and regardless of fault, regardless of blame, it's our job to move forward from where we're at. And that message in today's society is a really hard sell sometimes.
It's a hard sell. It is. The other thing about our society is it's our society. So what?
Yeah.
That's really the nuts and bolts of what you and I talk about when we say, yeah, of course, politics is there's a whole political divide going on. Yeah, there's all this crazy stuff that goes on in the news. Yeah, the weather forecast is always terrible. Yeah. So what? So what?
Yeah. So what? So today is Monday. As you know, Mondays are one of my favorite days. I hit the gym. I had a great day. Had great sessions. My clients are awesome. Got a couple young guys that are last day before they head back to school. They wanted to see me. So very upbeat day. I get to do my podcast tonight. As you know, I got to go to the store when we hang up because I get
Of
my
course,
eggs every
yeah,
week.
it wouldn't be a Monday otherwise.
And so I have had a great week. And you know what's happening this week, Walt, that is so amazing? You're going to be so excited. Football starts this week.
Of course I should have realized. Sorry,
what a
was a softball
week
you threw me and I missed it. I completely missed it.
Yeah, you did. But we get through the period of no sports, no watchable sports on, and now all of a sudden we have football. What a great week coming up. So it's that fantastic week. Labor Day's coming up and it's full of football. Just life couldn't be any better.
That's a great perspective.
Yeah.
That's the perspective of appreciation.
Yeah.
We're making fun. We're making light of the fact that, one of us is a football, one's a baseball fan, all that kind of thing. But really what we're pointing at is how valuable appreciation is. When you have something to appreciate, it changes everything.
You and I both, football doesn't make my life. I enjoy it, but it's not that big of a deal. You know that.
Yeah, right.
But the concept to me is you can make anything. You can use it. What's going right here?
Yes.
The idea that, all of this wonderful stuff, I look around the world and seeing, all this artificial intelligence stuff. I'm fascinated by that. I'm still horribly bothered by quantum theory. As you know, that bothers me and haunts me. But the rest of the
keeps
stuff
you up at night. I know it does.
It really bothers me. It does. But
I don't know. Just as an aside, do you realize there are people as confused and as upset about artificial intelligence as you are about quantum theory? I'm just pointing that out. It's just a fact.
It is exactly perspective. Artificial intelligence, it may become the Terminator, right? And I'm on board with that if it does. So
it could happen. Anything's possible.
But also the fact that we have all this information, and you know how I'm a student. At the end of the day, I love to learn, and I love to. So I'm excited about all these possibilities. The fact that light responds to being observed bothers me, but the rest of the stuff.
It excites me, actually.
I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know.
I'm still figuring that part out. I don't know if I could tell you what it means, but I can tell you it's cool.
It is, but it violates everything we're supposed to know. But anyway,
but I'm okay with that. Actually, I love the idea that it violates everything we're supposed to. To me, that actually is refreshing. Well, sorry,
it is. I just want to know. How does light know? That's all. If you can answer me, how does it know? Then I'm good. Just answer that, Walt. I'm good.
The answer is I don't know.
Exactly. But again, we're joking. Of course, it doesn't really bother me. I am fascinated by it. I don't. If I have the ability to leave it alone if I wanted to, and I don't leave it alone, so clearly it doesn't bother me.
But, absolutely, yeah.
But all of it. So I just wake up every day saying, "This is amazing." Your background flashed again. That was good. I don't know what happened. Your stars blinked for a second.
Yeah, well, I was starting to sparkle like I was being beamed up onto the.
Okay, I'm concerned because we're talking about quantum theory, and all of a sudden you turned into particles. So.
Well, that's what it was, once you start mentioning quantum physics, all of a sudden all kinds of crazy stuff happens.
Yeah, but but just the ability, the opposite of complaining is gratitude to me, being grateful for the expressing gratitude for the people in your life. I got amazing people. We have for people that two people that have never physically met, we're very good friends, you know.
Amazing, really.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm just grateful for the people in my life, and it's just, that's not fake. There's some people that think that's what you do for a living. It's what I really believe in. And my
Yeah.
friends know that. In fact, my friends, they're like, oh God, Joel, calm down. And, it's just, it's okay. But it's really what I believe. And so the concept, complaining and the victim mindset to me is probably and because I lived a period of my life where I was a victim of everything, I believed it.
Yeah.
And I complained about my lot in life horribly.
Oh, yeah.
I complained about being born into total dysfunctional craziness, and, all the stuff that I perceived was not right, and I shouldn't have been. Other people didn't have to go through what I went through. And when one day I woke up and realized, those are reality. That's reality. My belief system now is everything that I went through prepared me for today. They were part of my strengthening process.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not grateful in the sense I'm grateful that it happened to me or saw stuff I saw, but I am very grateful that I survived it. And the skills that were developed by me surviving are what have me the person I am today.
Which is
So
a
I'm
pretty
not me
amazing
without
person.
that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I know you after having gone through all that, because in my mind, you are one of the most amazing people I've ever met. So thank you for surviving all of that stuff.
Oh, thank you. And it's just, but so the idea was, so when I speak of these things, I'm not speaking of them in a judgmental way that I've never been through it. I tell you, the worst part of my life was not jail. It wasn't eating out of a trash can. The worst part of my life is when I was in that complaining victim mindset. It was so, it was the worst level of depression I ever experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were telling me that, as you're telling us that for the umpteenth time, I'm thinking back to when my worst periods of life were. There are two that I've had that were really bad. One was when my ex-wife left me. The other one was when my business fell apart in 2008. And neither one of them rises anywhere close to what you went through. But did that stop me from complaining? No. Especially in 2008. By the time my ex left, I had learned a lot about this, so I wasn't doing as much complaining as I would have done, some 14 years before that. But the fact was, I was still, there was some complaining going on, but it was the complaining from yesteryear, from the earlier year, that was just, it was almost incessant. It was continuous.
Yes.
And I didn't understand just how much I was setting myself up by doing it. That's the thing that always comes back to me. I mean, it's actually kind of easy for us to sit here and say, all this complaining doesn't do us any good. All it does is make us stuck. It gives us victim mindsets. But when you're in it, when you're in that victim mindset, it seems impossibly difficult to get out of it, even if you're in a situation like the one I was in, which is nowhere near the situation that you were in. Nowhere near. It's not even in the same ballpark. But didn't matter. The fact of the mind being in that space, that was all it took.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. So when I speak of complainers and people in victim mindset, it is with empathy and understanding. It is not in judgment.
Right.
It is a complete understanding. And while everything else needs to be put on hold till you can adjust that, because nothing happens in that mind. Now, stuff happens. It's not the stuff you
Not
want to
good stuff.
happen.
Yes.
And when I was in the situation, I was August 17th was my 29th anniversary of not gambling and getting in recovery.
Wow. Happy anniversary. Yeah.
Thank you. That was last week. And so within that, that was a terrible night where everything, day where everything fell apart. I lost everything. And so there was not a lot to be joyous about. There was a lot to
At
complain
that
about.
point.
There was no path forward. I knew I was facing a felony criminal charge. I'd lost everything. And there wasn't a plausible path forward. I couldn't, short of winning the lottery, and I did not even have $1 to buy a lottery ticket. So short of that impossibility, nobody wins the lottery without buying a ticket. So that shot was gone. There, how would I ever do anything? How would I ever have a life to imagine? The scarlet letter of being a convicted felon, and I'll never be able to work, and I'm doomed. That was, and I wallowed in that for a little bit, and at some point I realized, hey, It is what it is, and it's, I don't know if it can be fixed, but I know sure as hell it's not going to be fixed by me sitting on my ass complaining about it.
Mm.
And I eventually started developing this and discovered things. And the more I took progress and did things, then there was glimmers of hope, and then things started happening, and then eventually understanding the law of attraction, deleting, complaining, or trying to. It's not an instant thing. You have to, you're not going to snap your finger to stop that.
No.
But over time, like if I would complain, I would immediately interrupt the thought of complaining and replace it with positive. Throughout all of this stuff, I was in great health. I went through all that stuff and maintained my physical health, my mental health, even though I was suicidal and depressed and anxious and ADHD, but my brain function and cognitive abilities never left me. So I was great. I started finding things like that to be grateful for. And then that started paying off, and, getting to a place right now, I just have a life that I could never imagine. And ironically, it was built on the foundation of all the stuff I was complaining about and whining about way back in the day.
So there's the real value of the complaining. The complaining actually gave you a reverse of what you wanted.
Yes.
And when you were finally willing to leave the complaining behind, you started getting what you wanted.
Yes.
So that's the actual value of the complaint. The actual value of the complaint is now you know what to leave behind.
Yes. And that's
so
valuable.
Yeah.
So valuable.
So once we know that, okay, well then it becomes easy. What am I complaining about? That's what I need to leave behind.
It's easy once you really buy into it. It takes a little while, so anybody that if you're watching this and you've been complaining, it's generational complaining. If you feel like your situation, we're not being harsh and saying just snap your finger. Just try this. When you are feeling that, you find yourself complaining, you make either a thought or statement of complaint. Try to immediately interrupt that if you can and follow what is right. The fact that you've been given another day to live. That might be the only thing you got today, but at least you woke up today. That's a starting place. Start, listing the things, my cognitive functioning is well. I'm physically in good health. Start naming the things that are right and being grateful for those. And eventually the replacement, the neural pruning in the brain, the adjustment, the neuroplasticity in the brain adjusts. The more you do the positive thought, the whole structure of the brain responds to that positive direction, and the part that was responding with the negative eventually dies off. It goes away. And now that doesn't happen quickly. You and I have talked about this. It's taken me, you and I have been talking for years. And I used to say, I don't think, what do we used to joke, say, we just got a kindergartner's knowledge of this and we're figuring it out.
Yeah, that's right. We did. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably past that now.
We made it to grade school.
Yeah. But I have, I have no doubt things work out. And not just work out, they work out spectacularly in my favor all the time. And even though there may be things along the way that don't seem that way, I'm almost fascinated about how's that going to flip around to the positives. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Oh, there it is. It's almost automatic,
Yeah. After a while, you start asking yourself, how does this work out? Because I know I've been in this kind of negative space before. I've been through it enough times now. I know it always works out. How is this one going to work out? And
yes.
You know what the most amazing thing is? I always guess wrong.
Yeah.
Every single time. I haven't gotten it right yet. I keep hoping like, law of averages are going to kick in or something, but it doesn't happen. I don't know.
Pretty much the pathway from me, from Florida to South Carolina to Virginia.
Yep.
And it's an implausible, almost impossible. It's not a believable story.
No, it really isn't.
The synchronicities and the things that happen. If I didn't live it, it couldn't have happened. It's just impossible for it to work out the way it worked out.
Yeah.
But it did. So way back when I was 1995 in August, when I was sitting there with just no hope, my family's not speaking to me, and I'm in desperate mindset. I could see if you would have told me, here's what's going to happen in 29 years, and I would have said, that would, you couldn't even make a movie out of that because it's just nobody's going to believe it. And here we are. So, but it starts with identifying. This is not about bashing people who are complainers, or it's about understanding how you can liberate yourself from a lifetime of complaining, the generational complaining that's handed down, families that spend their entire life all they knew was complaining. This isn't judging, this is all they knew. But once you know better, then you can start to implement that change yourself, break those generational programmings that have taken years to build, and build new ones. And it works. And the more you do it, the more you believe it.
One of the things that I kind of do with myself, with my own generational stuff, because everybody has generational stuff of some kind.
Sure.
I mean, you wouldn't be born without it. That's just part of the way it is to be born. You get born with generational stuff. My own generational stuff has to do with business failures. There's like up and down my family line over and over again, all kinds of business failures and negative stuff about money and all kinds of things like that. But as I look at it and as I experience my own attempts, because they are attempts sometimes, as I experience my own attempts to break through that and to shift that and to change that pattern, I like to remind myself, I'm not just changing it for myself, I'm changing it for my entire family.
Absolutely.
I mean, that seems kind of impossible on the surface, but over time I've come to realize, no, I really am changing it for my family. I'm changing our family narrative, one small step at a time, but I really am. I'm turning the narrative into something that it wasn't before.
I love that. And that's a great perspective. I feel the same way. My biological father, severe compulsive gambler who ended up committing suicide. My mother's father, severe alcoholic, very abusive, ended up committing suicide. Mental illness, addiction on all sides of my family. It's just, pretty deep stuff. So and not that I'm better than any of these people. What I have believed in since I started my journey and getting everything back together, in a weird way, I've honored these people who were unable or didn't have the ability or have the knowledge to pull themselves out of it. I have stopped that in my family. Generationally, it stopped with me. And right now, my family has historically, these are resilient people. They struggle. They went through a lot. Now, the fact that I was able to sort of adjust this, and the one that survived it, I'm sorry they went through it. I wish I would have been around with the knowledge I have right now to fix it. But nonetheless, here I am, and they are honored in a sense. And I've long forgiven these people. There were horrible experience for these people, but I've long forgiven them because they were very ill. They had a lot going on, and it just, I wouldn't be the man I am today without those experiences. So I have forgiven them, and I talk to them, and today, and I like to think that they're hearing me, and they're like, at least that came out of it.
I'm glad you're mentioning that, because that is a very important piece that I may have inadvertently glossed over. The piece that says this isn't about blaming the past family. This is about helping to reshape the family narrative. But just because you're reshaping the family narrative doesn't mean that you're dissing past family members. If anything, you're helping them to let go of that, because you're changing that whole narrative. But actually, there's reason to honor them, because they gave each of us this narrative that gives us the opportunity to make changes that we would not have had otherwise. They just would not have been part of the conversation.
My children who I adopted would not have had a father if I didn't go through what I went through and the situation I went through. So, in honoring our family members I did what they weren't able to do because the situation at the time didn't afford it. We had different knowledge there. And so that's the key here. When we talk about healing generational trauma, some people often think you're bashing those in the past. We're not. We're moving on from it, but also understanding that whatever they were going through. I'm not a fan of blame, as you know. Blame is a waste of time and energy. It's just an understanding of origins. They did what they did because that's all they were able to understand. Both my biological father and my grandfather had horrific childhood events that I later found out that led to obviously one using gambling, one using alcohol as coping mechanism. And they didn't have, it isn't like today where you could talk about some of that stuff or have, you just had to go deal with those things. So understanding their stuff is, my grandfather who was, my perception of him for so long was he was evil. He was just very sick, and he faced a lot of demons, and went through a lot, and somehow I was the one that survived and pulled up. I've changed. Not only did it end with me, but I've retroactively healed them on some, and to me, spiritually on some level. That it didn't change it, but it now has an understanding that it was all necessary for me to get here.
I would even go so far as to say that by appreciating what they went through, appreciating they were doing the best they could with what they had at that time, with what they knew at that time, by doing that, we are not only shifting our narrative, we're shifting their narrative.
I agree.
And we're saying, you know what? So what that we're not perfect, whatever perfect means. So what? We're doing the best we can. We're all doing the best we can. Why don't we give ourselves credit for that? Let's give ourselves credit for that instead of the complaining piece. That's how you shift away by making those kinds of decisions. Like, I'm not going to be the complainer anymore. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to think about it differently. I'm going to look at it differently. And in the process of looking at it differently, I'm going to say, it's actually better than I thought it was.
Absolutely. And because your perspective, like somebody, I was talking to this young man the other day, and he is a brilliant guy. I mean, just brilliant. And he studies, he is into some type of astronomy. I don't know I don't exact, but it's the study of far away places kind of thing,
Okay.
And he's really deep, and they have atomic telescopes or whatever those things are called, those really crazy things. So he's so excited that he to get access to these telescopes, you have to reserve them. I mean, the time on them are very valuable. I think he's out in Colorado. So
wow,
he's been on the lottery to sit in one of those gigantic telescopes for about 6 months. We found out the other day he has an hour.
Wow.
Which he's already plotted what section of the universe at what time, and he is so excited about that. Now, to me, making me sit in front of a telescope for an hour observing that is literally like, you want to torture me? But to him, it's his nirvana. He's so excited, and I can't help but be excited for him because he was explaining it, and he's so much smarter in that arena than I am. So I'm just sitting there acting sort of like I know. I'm like, wow, and I don't even know what he's talking about. But it's so, but the ability to be grateful for the stuff we're really into, and not focus on it's easy. Society points out what's wrong is the problem. There's nobody running around pointing out what's right, and that's and politics has a lot to do with that. I'm not trying to get into all that crazy, but politics is, it's about complaining and being negative about the other side. That's it. That's all they do.
Well, I am going to point out that there are two people who are saying what's right. And they're the two who are having this conversation right now, because we actually do say there's a lot right.
There's a lot right.
There's a bunch right.
Yeah,
so here's two right here.
Yeah. I have, my son Justin's here. My son Chris is in Missouri. They're both, they're both going through early adulthood, hoping, to find their way. They're doing good. I got my neighbors who I've become very, very close with over the years that we're like family. Yeah, I have my clients who are family. I mean, where it's just you get so close to them. So I have all it. That's what's going right. And when you and I talk for this hour every Monday night, we're always talking about what's right, what's exciting. We always laugh. We always have a good time. And so that's our reality. It's just, and so complaining is a roadblock that we don't know is there, and we're the creator of it. And then being able to adjust it, give yourself some grace, and don't beat yourself up, but just start replacing the complaining with gratitude, and be shocked at what happens.
Well, if you've been listening to this episode, now you don't have an excuse. It's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, we just pointed out to you. There it is.
There it is. Sorry, we've taken the license away.
Oh, good stuff, though. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you. I appreciate the whole conversation. And I love how we can take something like complaining, which is a negative topic, and turn it into something to laugh about and feel joy
Yeah,
about,
have fun.
and find
And,
the plus side on it.
well, and it's one of those topics that we all do it at some point.
Mm,
It's not about being good or bad. It's just
no.
understanding that dialogue that we have with ourselves is so important. That there's nothing more important going on in our world than that internal monologue or dialogue that is taking place inside of you. That's so important because it really dictates your reality. And that's big. And so complaining is filtering is from a negative perspective. So I love our audience. I love this. There's people out there that listen to us. I get every now and then I get an email or
Mhm.
Facebook message from somebody. So I'm really grateful that we have people that enjoy what we're talking about. But if nothing else happens, I just enjoy you and I talking every week, my friend.
Yeah. It's been good for, my goodness, 12 years ago is when we started doing this. It's
Yeah.
been a while, and I've
Yeah.
loved every time.
Yeah. It's always
been
fun.
better and
We always
better
have
every time.
something fun.
We do. So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.